Right, carrying on with rook endgames where there's balance on one wing and a rook in front of a 7th rank pawn on the other wing. I finished the last video, this is really just a continuation of that one, in this position. It's white to play. This is a game from 2002. White to play and decide on your winning plan. The only reason that I sort of split the videos up is because that first one was already the best part of an hour, and I've got 5 positions to look at here, which is going to take quite some time as well. So it was going to be just a too long a video basically. So this is a continuation of that. So yeah, pause the video if you like and have a go at working out what you do here as white. It probably won't make a lot of sense unless you've watched that first video. So there are 3 winning plans that we go through in that. Is one of them applicable here? And we should very quickly work out, yes, one of them is very, very applicable here. We can sacrifice the b7 pawn for the swapping of the rooks. And that's just going to lead to an immediately 1 king and pawn ending. It's actually pretty similar to the very first position in the last video, except that white has an extra f pawn. And that was 1 for white if white got the opposition. So if white's got an extra pawn, it's sort of trivially 1 for white. In the game, white blundered with rook e8. And the reason this is a blunder is it doesn't guarantee the swapping of the rooks. And black quite rightly shoved in this intermezzo rook b6 check before taking the pawn on b7. But it was a very simple win with rook d8. The intermezzo check can now be blocked. Rooks get swapped. It's a very easy king and pawn ending to win that one. So yeah, well done if you decided on rook d8. It's a very easy win. But it's worth carrying on going on the game because it's quite instructive. What I think is particularly instructive is both the players in this game, both rated very, very highly, and they some of the moves in a bit are just, they're calamitous, really. I mean, they're moves that I'm thinking, oh, there's no way I'd play that, and yet they're both much stronger players than me, for example, which is, I don't know if that's encouraging or baffling or both. Don't know. So the game went rook e8. I mean, these moves by black are pretty good. White pushed the e-pawn. It's just completely drawn now. And black grabs the f-pawn. This is just hopelessly drawn. I mean, white carried on, but there's not really much left to be done. So rook e7 check. I mean, you could pause the video and think, what would you play here as black? I mean, all the moves are drawn really, except for the rook f7's obviously a blunder. In the game, king f8 was played, which is not throwing away the draw, but this is a knight's pawn, so first rank defence. I would have played king g8 here all day. King g8, my rook's coming to f8, that's it. But it's just a draw. King f8 played, rook off to a7, and now black does have to play king g8. Weirdly, rook g3 is also a draw, although I think that's going to be just Kling and Horwitz probably that's going on there, but harder to see and a bit nervous that our king's on the long side. So yeah, king g8 is the move to play here. But in the game, black played rook c3 and then it's lost. So king g8, the rook's coming to the back rank. It's a draw. It's a knight's pawn. First rank defence works. King g6, rook f8 is a draw. But in the game, black played rook c3, and white then threw the win back, like threw away the win, a sort of a return favour, by playing king h5. King g8, rook d7, and the Philidor position's been reached. And after a bit of messing about, quite a lot of messing about, in fact, they finally agreed to draw, like a ridiculous amount of messing about. There you go, and they finally agreed to draw there. So in this position where black has just blundered by not playing king g8, what should white have played instead? Well, you've got to stop the black king getting into g8, and so the winning move is king g6. Obviously black can't play king g8 now, So they might check, rook c6 check, but then your king can go to h7. The black king is sort of being forced out onto the long side. And after the rook comes back and hits or stops the g pawn from advancing, saying how you're making progress, white can play something like rook g7. That g pawn's coming up the board. Rook c4 perhaps, so that if g5, rook h4 check, but even that's just fine for white. The king's just happy enough on g6. There's no tactic there for black. But white can also chuck in this check and then come back to g5. It's a very easy win for white. The Lucena position is going to be reached pretty quickly. So yeah, bizarre that such strong players managed to play so many strangely bad moves, but they did. But in the original position, plan 1 works. Sack the b7 pawn for the swapping of the rooks. It's a very easy to win king and pawn ending. Next, this is a game from 1979. It is white to play, and white pushes g7, and it's not good enough for the win. They think they've got plan 3. They think they've got plan 3 going on, and indeed after black plays king b7, it's a win. They have got plan 3 going on. White pushes the c-pawn, and we've basically reached a mirror image of the position we used in the previous video to demonstrate plan 3. Okay, so I'll just sort of go through a reminder of this, that how the white king just eventually runs the black king out of moves, and the rook can't just sit on a5 and guard the f5 pawn. The black king has no squares. So it's that's going on in this 1979 game. I mean, the game actually ended with rook g2, king c3, and black realised what was going on and resigned. But let's just see that attempted drawing plan, the sort of obstinate, the line of logic that black might have of, I'm just going to defend my c pawn laterally. I'm going to move my king back and forth between a7 and b7. If you come and support your g pawn, then I'm going to have my rook down here, just checking the hell out of you. And as soon as you make a run over here to try and grab my c pawn, I'm going to defend it laterally, and then just keep moving my king backwards. I'll leave my rook on g5 and just move my king back and forth. But it's going to be the same as we saw with the plan 3. White will just be able to force black to run out of moves in this way. I mean, you can see black's sort of obstinately just saying, well, I'm moving my king back and forth. There you go, you've hit my rook, fine, I'll move it back to g1. As long as you're doing nothing, I'm going to move my king back and forth. Careful not to play rook g5 check here, because king f6 will simultaneously defend the g pawn and attack the rook. So you just play another king move. King to d6, fine, whatever. I'm defending my c pawn. Now what are you doing? Oh, my king has no moves. Okay. So in the original position, after g7, black can't play king b7. That is where they want their king, but they've got to chuck in c4 check first. Absolutely crucial. And after king b4, king b7, white might think, right, what's the problem? King b5, and black's just going to, now I can do the king back and forth. And you've got nothing. If king c6, you're no longer forcing me to defend my c pawn, and I can just move my rook. So that was the one rank further down crucial extra move that black needed to have the freedom to go for that sort of same obstinate mindset that I just talked about a minute ago, which didn't work, where we got to like, oh, my king's out of moves. Here, white doesn't have a square. There is no square the white king can go to that forces the black king to sort of run out of moves, and stops the rook. You can't simultaneously attack c4 and stop the black king from moving. Basically, that's what's going on there. So after g7, which is, by the way, there's nothing wrong with g7. White can't win this position. and g7 was played, and white did win it, so I guess it was the best move. Black should play c4 check first, and then king b7, and it is a draw. But it might make us think, well, hang on a minute. If it's just about the extra space, why doesn't white play c4 on the first move and now go for the same plan? You know, black's sort of powerless against this plan. Well, black plays rook g3 check, and white's got a couple of choices here. One of them's like, yeah, whatever, I'm coming to do the plan. King c2. This is the point, you see, is that white hasn't pushed the pawn to g7, so the black king can now actually make a run for the g pawn. King d6, g7, and then king e6 or king e7. Neither's fine. And yeah, the g pawn's falling, and the king and pawn ending is just drawn. I don't even think black has to take the g pawn with the rook. I mean, if he takes with the rook, obviously white's got this pawn swap, rook swap option, and yeah, that's just gonna be a draw. But they didn't even have to take the pawn with the rook. They could have taken it with the king, and I think we're probably still in a drawn rook and pawn ending. So going back to this position after this rook g3 check, you're like, oh, okay, all right, very clever. You can bring your king over, but I'm not going to let you. I'm going to come this way with king a4. This time black's got king b6, and it's the white king that's out of squares. So if white pushes the pawn, g7, which sort of forces the black king back, because now a rook b8 check is being threatened. King b7, and that's stopping the white king coming into c6. So when the white king comes forward to b5, rook g5. If the king tries to get back again, rook g3. We keep the white king boxed in. And if king a5, we're not attacking the c pawn, and we're not threatening to get out. So any old rook move along the g file. You've just got to be ready to meet king b5 with rook g5, and king a4 needs to be met with rook g3. Okay, they're corresponding squares, I guess, aren't they? They're your corresponding squares to finish this off between the king and the rook. Obviously, the white rook can't move. The black king just stays where it is. It's just a complete draw. If you do end up getting the Dvoretsky endgame manual, and to be honest, if you're watching videos, as you know, still watching my videos as far as this, and I hope you bought it a long time ago because I keep recommending it. It's sort of quite amusing seeing him get a little bit. What's the word? He's sort of quite cutting about the analysis of some of his fellow grandmasters, because he says, oh, so and so says that c4 is the way that white can win this original position, but they're obviously wrong. He uses sort of language that's it's funny because it's either it's just he's a blunt character, or it's just unnecessarily confrontational. It comes across like he's had an argument with them over it or something, and he's like, well, here's proof that I'm right and you're wrong. Yeah, so have a read of that. See, because it's always the same people he ends up sort of criticising their analysis. In fact, we've got a study coming up. I haven't got the year of it, but I've got a study coming up as the next position, and that's one character he's always criticising, which I'll get on to. Right, so this next one is a study that appeared in a fellow Grandmasters of Dvoretsky's endgame manual, and he goes on about how it's just completely erroneous in all the things that this guy says about it, and so on, and it's just sort of quite amusing to read. He's got a real problem with this other guy, and but you know, I'm still going to go through it because he's right. This other guy's analysis is wrong, but it doesn't have to be said in such a confrontational way. It's completely unnecessary as far as I can tell, but maybe he was just sort of quite a blunt character. Anyway, so this other guy's analysis was that this position is a draw. It's black to move, and the position is a draw because black can play. Oh God, silly scrolling of light chess. Rook a2, so that when white takes the f pawn, we saw this in one of the other positions in the last video I did actually, that there was no way for the white side to create a passed f pawn, which remember is the main winning tactic, if you like, the main winning strategy of plan 3 to win the black rook for the a7 pawn. You do it by creating a passed f pawn. But here we meet that with check, king takes g4, and rook back to a2. And in fact, this is exactly the same as that position from the other video. In that, you know, we've got a 2 and 1 on the king side, but the white rook can't get out, and even if white creates a passed g pawn or a passed h pawn, it's completely useless. We know that from the not the Vancouver defense video. However, after this rook a2, white doesn't have to take on f5, and white does indeed win this by going back. Rather than plan 3, they go back to plan 1, which is to swap the rooks, sacrifice the a pawn to swap the rooks. Rook e8, rook takes a7, swap the rooks, and this is a winning king and pawn ending. Black's got this little stalemate refuge trick going on, which is quite amusing, but obviously white doesn't have to take on f5. King f6, f4, and it's still a winning king and pawn ending after this. Okay, you can just sort of follow the pawn race through, and it's not particularly close. f8 equals queen check. By the way, after that rook e8, you might be wondering why black doesn't shove in this intermezzo check, but then we just immediately start taking all these pawns. King takes f5, rook takes a7, king takes g4. We've got a 3 on 1 there, and that's going to be a win as well. It's a bit unusual though, the rook e8. Like all the other stuff we've seen so far, when we go for the swapping rooks plan, usually it's rook to d8, so you're ready to block. But here, I think it's because we can snatch on f5 straight away. So rook a2 doesn't draw. But then that leaves you wondering also, how does black draw this position? Their rook's in a good place, behind the a pawn as it should be, defending f5 laterally. And h5 springs to mind. So even if the f pawn sort of does fall in a minute, at least the g pawn doesn't fall straight after it. But white's really just got the same winning idea with rook e8, just a swap of the rooks. Rook a6 check, king takes f5, rook takes a7, rook to e5, rook f7 check, king g5, takes, the g pawn's falling, it's gone. One sort of interesting thing here is that rook e8 is the only winning move. So you might think, well, it doesn't really matter how I do it, rook d8, you know, if he takes on a7, I'll still swap the rooks. But this is actually a draw. It doesn't look, it's not immediately obvious that it's a draw, but it is. Black takes the opposition. You might think, well, he can't get the opposition here, because, you know, we're going to outflank him here and win the f pawn, but black can push the f pawn. Like, oh, I think g takes f4 actually loses here. It does, yeah, I just checked. It looks like white loses. That the black king just steams through here, and then there's a g pawn too. I mean, white's not lost this, obviously, but they've not won it anymore, and black's got the opposition, crucially, on the 4th and the 6th rank. So yeah, in the original position, black can't draw this. I'm just trying to work out what their best try is, really. Rook h5, white's only got one winning move, which is rook e8 straight away. Anything else, they can't delay that. Anything else, and black is going to achieve the draw there. Rook a2 was the other move, wasn't it? But yeah, rook e8 is the only winning move. So not a draw. It's a win for white, and it turns out that plan 1 was the way to go there, with a bit of flexibility to switch into one of the other plans. So, for example, in which line was it? In this line. Yeah, I think we switched into one of the other plans here, didn't we? So that's plan 2 now, to swap the a7 pawn for, in this case, 2 of black's kingside pawns, and that's still just a winning rook and pawn endgame. Right, next, this is a game from 1986. It is black to play, pause the video, and decide what would you do here as black to... Well, you're obviously trying to get a draw here. You're the defending side. I'm seeing that this particular position has been reached 3 times in the Masters database. All 3 were won by white, but black does have a way to draw it. And they're trying to prevent really white from doing plan 2. Okay, this is very similar to what went on in plan 2, which was a 1954 game covered on the first video. By the way, I don't know if I said on that, but that if black had their pawns here, it's going to be much easier for them. If they've already advanced this pawn to f6, which they have, then it's going to be a lot harder, because what they really want to do is just sort of sit their king on f6 or g7, although it's more complicated when the white pawn hasn't pushed to a7. Once the white pawn's pushed to a7, with this wave pawn formation and the black king just sort of sitting there quite happily, it's a cast iron draw. So in the game the game that's in the book, Rook a3 was played. I've got another game here where Rook a4 was played and white went on to win, but neither of them are what you need to do here, which is g5. So let's go through what happened in the game. Rook a3, and white just pushes the pawn. a6, black does nothing, white just pushes the pawn. Okay, remember, we only push this pawn all the way to a7 if we can execute one of the winning plans. And we can execute one of the winning plans. It's going to be plan 2. So yeah, Rook a3 and then f3. Okay, and in fact, I think plan 2, if I can just go back to the position briefly, I think it starts off with an f3 check, doesn't it? Yeah, so in this position, you might remember it from the last video, f3 check, king f5, and then a7. And the plan is we get our king to g7, I think to h6 actually, and we're going to swap the a7 pawn for these two over here. So we're basically in that position here now after that f3 move. And I'll go through the rest of the game, but we have already seen this. These are the actual moves played in this 1986 game. There's nothing really that black can do to eventually stop the white king making its way to g7. I've got a feeling that somewhere around here there's going to be the checkmate shot, isn't there? Is it? Oh no, black recognises that. Rook a3. Is there a checkmate shot here? I'm just wondering if there's a tactic where this black king has no squares. I think it's falling with check, isn't it? The a7 pawn. I think it's here if black doesn't play rook a6 check, just to something like rook a2. Obviously that's not one of the engine's moves, I think, for a reason. Looks to me like rook c8, because you want to block the rook a6 intermezzo, don't you? I'm predicting rook a2, it will say rook c8 is just a win. No, I wasn't as right as I thought I was. It's the top move, but it's only +8. Oh, it's just changed its mind. I've played it and now it's checkmate in 17. Okay, so I've learned something from my own video. Brilliant. Anyway, the black player in this particular game, 1986, didn't allow that. You can't do rook, what would be d8 now, because rook takes a7, that's with check. Although, interestingly, I wonder, would that have messed the... Sorry, after black's next move. Does rook d8 chuck away the win? It looks like it does. It sort of does, plus 0.8. Slight edge for white still. Anyway, why are we doing that when this was the winning plan? Black gets fed up and pushes the g-pawn. Oh yes, and it's all this business. You might remember this from the last video, that we can now play g4 check, which doesn't work if the black rook is on a6. So if black set it up to be clever and have their rook on a6 in this particular position, you need to do a sort of a weird triangulation thing. But the f6 pawn is not protected, so you can smash the black king out into the open, or black has to accept their f-pawn's gone, and this is how the game actually went. And yeah, black resigned there. Anyway, there's more to say on this, because, well, first of all, we need to carry on with what could have happened in the game, and then also what black should have done to draw, which was g5. So rook a3 played, white just pushes the a-pawn, and then the plan is going to be to play f3, rook a3, f3, and we've seen all of that already. But at the moment, the f pawn is pinned to the white king. So what if black tries this? King g4. You can't play f3 now. You can't move your rook. Well, you can move your rook, but you're going to lose your a pawn. And if you move your king, the black king's coming into f3. So this looks like a pretty decent defensive try. So you've got to move your rook somewhere sensible, you think. Rook f8 and rook g8, they're both winning moves, in fact, but one of them is miles better than the other one. See if you can work out which one it is. That was enough time to pause the video if you wanted to. Yeah, and this is a nice little win. Rook f8, rook takes a7, rook takes f6. And I think we're threatening two different checkmates here. Both of those are checkmates, and there's no way that black can defend against both of them. So that'll be a nice way for the game to have finished. So yeah, rook a3, rook a4, they're both losing moves. G5 is what needs to be played. Okay, and you think, well, hang on a minute, that's going to bust your own king out into the open, isn't it? Well, yeah, but white's not pushed the pawn yet. So hg, fg, a6, black king comes back. King g6. If white carries on pushing the pawn, obviously we've got to come all the way back to g7. And the white king might try and, if white sees what's coming, because obviously black's now going to work like hell to stop white creating a passed f-pawn, they might think, well, I'm going to come this way with the king, king h3. Well, you have to be careful not to get yourself in a mating net there, but the simple rook a3 is also fine. g4 check was also fine. I'm just interested to see if that actually leads to a mating net. King h4 with a... Yeah, black can do this, you see. Rook takes on f2. And if the rook moves somewhere, is it going to be sort of setting up a mating net? Rook b8, king g6. Check. Yeah, we just keep threatening the rook h2 checkmate in one, and white's got nothing better than a perpetual check. So that's quite an interesting end. So not a7. What if white sort of sees what's coming with the trapping in of the white king and plays king f1? Well, now black can play g4, and you sort of permanently stopped the f pawn from being pushed. If the white king comes across whilst the white pawn's still in a6, we can probably nab the pawn in f2 and come back and defend laterally. We'll need our king on g7 before we do that. And if the pawn's pushed, king g7. It's just a draw. There's just no way for white to make any progress. The only way they can make any progress here is if they can create a passed f pawn, which they blatantly can't. So yeah, draw. I suppose they could get their king to g5 and after rook a5 check come to h4, but then you're back to the, well, we can just move our king back and forth all day and leave our rook on a5. There's that thing going on as well. We don't need to win the pawn on f2 there as the defending side. We just need to wait on the a file until the white king hits b6 and then we check the hell out of it. Or if the white king insists on coming to g5, we play rook a5 check, and there's just no place for white to attack this pawn and make our king run out of moves, because remember our king is just going to be doing this back and forth on g7 and h7. Right, last but not least, this is a game from 1982. It is white to play. Pause the video and see if you can work out what white should play here. So white has actually only one drawing move in this position. It's incredibly hard for white to draw this. They have to treading sort of extremely carefully. It's not the move that was played in the game, which is rook a4 check. Okay, so black plays king c3, rook a8, and now black just pushes the f pawn. f5, rook a7, white just waits on the a file. f4 check, that can't be taken. Obviously rook f1 check followed by a1 equals queen, so the king sort of disappears back to h2 for a bit of shelter. But then the black king's going to make their way to pick off the H pawn. So rook a6. I mean, black can't do anything about their g pawn falling with check, but they don't need their g pawn. The white rook's got to go back to the a file. And then we're just going to push the, as soon as we get a chance, going to push the h pawn. The pawn can take. In fact, the pawn does take. If the king takes, rook h1 check, obviously. But then we have the sort of the, what's the word? The I hate it when I forget words. The lusted after the no, can't remember the word. F pawn. The holy F pawn. What's the word? Coveted. I got it just in time, just before this video was going to get really, really boring, as I just sit here trying to think of a word, because that didn't happen. Just so you know, this video wasn't boring. The last 30 seconds were extremely interesting. Anyway, so rook a4 check, not the way to go. King h2 is the drawing move, but black has to work very hard here still. Sorry, white has to work very hard for the draw. The Dvoretsky endgame manual, I think, a little bit glosses over this. King c4, g3, and that's stopping the passed f pawn, by the way. G3 is the move that needs to be played, because that's going to stop the creation of the f pawn. And now king b4, and then it just sort of stops there and says this is a draw. But white still only has one drawing move here. And it sort of talks about how it's just the same as a position earlier on that was studied in the book, and in fact we covered it on the last video on this, and it's from this 1983 video, and you can see the similarity in the position. But this is different because the black king is on g7 and not h7, and you'll see why that becomes relevant in a minute, and I just wonder if it was glossed over on this point. So yeah, the black king hits the rook. What's the problem, you might think? We'll just drop our rook back on the a file. This is now a win for black. They make contact with the a pawn, and white's like, fine, I'll just keep checking the hell out of your king. But the problem is that after this check, the black king can come to the f file. And when the white rook disappears back to a8, king f1, the white rook has to stay on the a file. Then we can come and swap the rooks. That's what black was threatening the entire time. Like, you might have been wondering why in this position, I don't know, check, king d3, why doesn't white play rook a8 here? Well, we can swap the rooks. Don't forget about plan 1. We've got a 3-on-2 on the king side. So incredibly hard for white to sort of guard against that. Back in this position, the problem with rook a8 is that black makes contact with the a pawn, and now you've got to just keep checking the king. You must keep checking the king, because if you don't, if you come back to a8, the black rook can just threaten the rook swap, basically. King f2, rook back to a8, king f1. White's like, what's so good about that? And it's like, well, this is where we're going to get, black's going to say, well, this is where we're going to get our rook swap. By the way, I think if king had gone to f3 instead of f2, it's still okay to go back to a8. It's still a win for, no, even that's still a win for black. I was thinking that we had this sort of intermezzo, rook a3 checks. It's unbelievably hard for white to defend this. So how does white defend this? Well, the key is that you've got to make sure that black can't hide from the checks. So you play, if I can get my chess to scroll properly for me, rook a6. And if black goes for the same thing, check all the way, check, and this is the bit where the king can't step to the f file. So the checks are just going to keep going and going, and if the black king comes up the board, then the rook swap's no longer a thing, and we can just go back to to a6. So really, really hard, I thought, that position. King h2 is the only drawing move. And then crucially after this g3, which is necessary to stop the creation of that passed f-pawn, you've got to drop back to a6 here. Rook a6. Only drawing move. Rook a6. Right, that's it. Those are the 5 extra positions. I'm not sure how long this this video is in total. I can't actually see that anywhere in front of me at the moment for some reason. But long enough that they probably shouldn't have been added to the first video. But that's us done on Rook endgames, where there's balance on one wing, Rook in front of a 7th rank pawn on the other wing, and we're about to move on to all the same things except the pawns on the 6th rank. And it's an absolute minefield. It's just, it looks to me to be one of the most studied positions in the history of studying chess endgames. So it's going to be quite an undertaking to go through all of that. So don't be surprised, particularly with it being Christmas, if there's not a video for quite some time, as I spend a long time getting to grips with all of that.